Welcome back to another episode of Off the Carousel here on the Field of 6E. I'm thrilled to be joined by a guy I've known for a long time, a good friend of mine, Jamion Christian, the new Bryant University head coach. This is the first time, Jamion, that you've been coaching back in the States since 2022, and you literally got off a plane coming home from Italy yesterday to get
I
back
did.
here and coach in the States. First and foremost, man, it's good to see you. It's good to see a smile on your face. It's good to have you back in the world of college basketball.
Man, it's great to be back. It's great to be back here working with you. And I appreciate, I'll say this on the call, man. I appreciate the support through the years, like the humor and the laughter. When you're choosing to be a coach sometimes and you fall off the pedestal a little bit, you need a lot of people around you supporting you and your voices and your comedy, especially keeping me humbled in those moments were really special. So I want to thank you for that.
Well, I appreciate that, man. Let's start with this. So, in the era of college basketball in 2025, in the era of the transfer portal, in the area of immediate eligibility, you got the job on April 3rd, and you didn't get back into the States, finishing up the playoff run with Palinsestro Trieste. Did I get that right?
Canestro Trieste.
Yeah, see, you said a lot better than I did. So how do you manage coaching a professional Italian basketball team in the playoffs with also trying to build, like, you just landed in the States, you got 12 guys on your roster. It's not
Yeah.
like you start from scratch, man. Like what has the last 7, 8 weeks been like for you?
Yeah. Number one, I got to thank Canestro Trieste for allowing me to take this opportunity during that time period and just seeing a bigger picture for me and for my family and where my heart really was, which is in college basketball. And then I have to thank Bryant University as well. Our
Mhm.
president there, Bill Smith, our athletic director, they really wanted me to be their head coach, and they were really willing to sort of let me work both jobs across the ocean. And I was surprised I didn't get more media attention. I mean, I was coaching literally two programs across the ocean, traveling back and forth a few times to coach a team here and coach a team there. I would say this: the last 2 months have been amazing in the sense of um, being able to hire staff. Brian Merritt, Bruce Shingler, Derek Wall, Harley Fuller. Those guys were really holding it down here on this side of it. And we wanted to get guys in that were experienced and understood what we needed and how we wanted to play and what we wanted to become, to get them here to kind of be on the forefront, to do all the visits and do all the work that they can do. And then on the other side, it was like we had the best year in 30 years of Pallacanestro Trieste basketball. We qualified for European competition. We qualified for Coppa Italia, which is like one of the top tournaments in the midseason. And then we finished sixth and had one of the most wins again in 30 years there. And so a chance to be able to fully close one chapter, be able to say goodbye to a ton of people in Italy who I really appreciate and loved and who restarted my career. Then also the chance to restart something as we're moving towards it. It was a hectic time. I mean, there were 6 a.m.s, Zoom calls back here and 4 a.m. Zoom calls back here. But I love the roster that we're able to put together, and I think it's going to be ready to compete right away for the America East, and that's our expectation.
So for the people that don't know, Trieste is it's in the little pocket of Italy that's kind of like that little sliver over on the corner
Yep.
where you think it's Slovenia, right? It almost feels
Yeah,
like Croatia. You're closer there to where Luka Doncic grew up in Slovenia than
absolutely.
you are to like Milan and Rome and Venice and all of the big cities that you're probably more familiar with in Italy. And you're right there on the coast. It's the Adriatic Sea. I've seen the pictures of it, man. I've seen the life that you lived out there. Why the hell are you coming back? Like you're living the dream, man. Why are you coming back?
You have to make a decision. Do I want to try to be, Greg Popovich, or do I want to try to be John Thompson? And I think those are the kind of decisions you have to make. I've always wanted to coach professional basketball. I always wanted to coach in Europe in particular. Michael Archieri gave me that opportunity to do that, and the ownership group of Podcast Trieste gave me the chance to do that. But the chance to come back here and keep it really simple. I mean, you'll understand this. I mean, I wanted to, my family stayed here while I was coaching in Italy. My wife's amazing, but I just wanted to wake up in the morning, kiss my kids, hug my wife, go to work and do what I love, and then come home and do the same thing again. And we were just separated for 2 years, and I just didn't have the chance to do that. And so that became such a driving force. Two things: driving force to be back with my family and being with the people that I love and doing what I love. But then I also just like, talking about a guy like John Thompson, I wanted a chance to go fight for a national championship. And, the thrill of March, the ability to beat a team and that energy that you have in March. Again, there's nothing like it in the world. And again, European regular season games and postseason games are insane. I mean, I wish you'd come over. And we had the second highest attendance in all of Italy this past year. Basically, every game was a sellout. It's incredible. But that month of March, that vibe you get, that energy you get, when you're going into a neutral site game, there's just nothing like it. And I just really want to be back a part of it.
It's when you leave the college game, it's not always easy to get back in, right? And I think, especially for the situation that you're in and the way that college basketball has kind of changed in the last 3 to 4 years, um, like how are you kind of preparing yourself to walk into an era where transfers are immediately eligible? NIL is the biggest thing that we have in college basketball right now. In March and April, you are going to be living in the portal, and that's not what it was when you left in 2022. So, like, how are you kind of mentally preparing yourself and getting ready for
Yeah.
the insanity that is college basketball in the
Well,
year of our Lord 2025?
I would say there's two things. My teams at the Mount, Siena and GW, were really powered by transfers.
Hmm.
So I remember being at William Mary as an assistant, and we were adding transfers well before anyone else was. And I always felt like it was a way that you could add something to your roster that maybe you couldn't automatically attain. And so we've always had a lot of success with transfers. Like when we look back at guys like Joe Bamisile, who finished up at VCU, and I think he averaged 1 or 2 points a game at VCU at Virginia Tech before he came to us at GW, and he was over 16 points a game with us. Guys like Matt Moyer, who are former top 75 players, or we had a list of guys that we've had a lot of success in the portal. Now, at the time, not everybody was living in the portal, but we've always kind of made a rhythm of living in that and trying to find a good player there. And secondly, what people don't realize in the overseas market is you're restarting a team every single year. Now, the US is really one of the only places in the world where you have multi-year contracts past 3 years.
Hmm.
Most of the guys on our team would have 1 year contracts. So I've had two teams there in Italy, and they've all those guys, but this year were on 1 year contracts. So you're replacing your team every single year. And that's just part of the attitude that you're going to have and how you have to build. And so, I think for me, it really actually helped me coming back to this because I could tell our staff, like, this is how we're going to build our team for this season. This is what's plentiful in the market this year. This is where we're going to add. Next year might be something different. And just having the amount of versatility that you need to keep adjusting is going to be very important. That's why I added the coaching staff that I added. I mean, I have guys who've been to the Final Four. I've had guys I work for guys like Rick Pitino. Like, I've got a coaching staff of guys. I got guys who won a JUCO national championship. Like, I
Hmm.
wanted a versatile group of guys on my staff that we could keep adjusting however we needed to adjust and not fight the wind. I think so many people in college basketball, maybe including myself, you're fighting against the wind, trying to push it back to what it used to be like. It's over with. And it's time to make a good pivot. And I think my time of coaching overseas and having to rebuild rosters each summer, we basically sign a guy in August, and then on August 18th we're playing an exhibition game. So
Yeah.
it happens to you that much quicker there. So I think that experience is going to really help me.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, one of our colleagues here at Field of 68, Terrence Oglesby, always says that college basketball right now is much more similar to European basketball than it is to what we think of when we think of college basketball, right? Because guys are there for basically 8, 9 months. Even in Europe, like you might get a guy for 6 weeks and then he's moving on to a different team, right? There's the turnover over there is insane compared to what we would be used to here with
Yeah.
professional basketball and kind of wow people are locked in. So it's almost like you're coming into a situation you're saying that's a little bit more stable
Yeah.
in American sports than you
I,
are.
I, I feel weirdly confident in this because like the difference is like overseas, like my owner could be mad at a guy, and they could release a guy without telling me. I mean, I could come in one day, he could be gone the next day, and here like having a little bit more control of the roster, of all control of the roster, and trying to figure that part out of it. It just again, I feel super comfortable, and the one thing that won't happen, like overseas, you can count on one or two teams imploding their team just by pure emotion. That won't happen in college basketball because most of the players, they can't change players in the middle of the year. But again, it's very similar. It's very similar. And I think as people get more accustomed to learning European basketball, they'll recognize that.
How did you kind of manage the pride aspect of this, right? Because there was a time where um, you were one of like the hottest young coaches in college basketball, right? And obviously did not go the way that you wanted it to go at GW. And I know that that was something that the way that it ended there was not the way
Yeah.
that you wanted it to end. So how were you able to kind of um, rebuild yourself after that? Because
Yeah.
it's not the easiest thing in the world to do, man. I know that
Yeah.
it was hard. Like I went through when I got laid off at NBC, right? And
Yeah.
I'm just, was it something where you just kind of sat back for a year and said, I need to figure out what I'm going to do. I need to figure out if this is what I want to do. Was it something where this opportunity came along in Italy and you're like, look, I can go do what I love and I could separate myself from maybe a sport where I'm kind of pissed at the people in that, you know what I'm saying? Like, how did you kind of rebuild yourself out of that?
Yeah, no one ever asked this question. I think this is one of the most important questions. Number one, just the perception that people have for you is not the perception that you have for yourself. And my parents are both like school teachers. My parents never made more than 55,000 individually. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
I don't come from these beginnings where it's like I'm used to having a ton and having a ton of abundance. I come from humble working class. That's where I come from, and I've always seen myself that way. And I do think it's great when people believe that you can be one of the best in college basketball. I think if you can be top 40 and top 40 under 40 in ESPN, that says something. Yeah, that says
Mhm.
that you have an ability and that you can inspire people to a certain level. But you also don't lose that ability to do that. Now, you can be in a great situation like I was at Siena, and leave a lottery pick like Jalen Pickett behind, which maybe isn't the smartest thing to do. But I always lean on like I go to GW because I was super ambitious. And again, I talk about wanting to win a national championship, and I felt like that's the type of place that, when managed the right way, has the ability to do that. No person that's been fired from there has become a head coach, and there's been a lot of fired head coaches from there. So just getting back to Bryant is a huge step in the evolution of coaches coming from GW and for myself. And just recognizing that. For me, the rebuild was really about like, I believe I can be one of the best who's ever done this, well, outside what other people think. And if I believe that, then I'm going to take this opportunity in Italy and I'm going to try to prove that I'm one of the best coaches in the world,
Mhm.
period. And and to take a leap and go and do that. Um, a lot of people talk to me about, man, like I'd love to do this. I'd love to coach overseas. And they just lack the courage to want to go and do that. And I just felt like, look, if I believe I can be one of the best in the world, then I need to take this opportunity and I need to elevate this team that had just been relegated. I mean, they're an
Mhm.
A2 2 years ago, and now they're a European competition. And so the rebuild, you talk about pride. The rebuild really just started with, what do I want my life to look like? What do I want my family's life to look like? And am I willing to go and fight for it? And I've just been in this like destroyer mode the last few years of just, I'm going to go and just try to destroy all the competition that we play against. It's not about anyone on the outside. It's purely about just trying to prove how good can I be in this. And I've tried to recruit players that kind of have that mindset throughout, and I've tried to have a staff that has that kind of mindset. And the other thing is, they always say the cream rises to the top. And if that's the case, and I get to put my work boots on again, I get to put my shoulder straps on, and I get a chance to go and do that again. And so just having a chance to go and do that, like I'll tell you this, and I've coached because I wanted to prove something. I've coached because I've wanted to keep something. I've coached because I wanted to protect something. And now I just get a chance to coach with the freedom of just wanting to be my very best every single day. And there is nothing better than having a chance to coach and just trying to prove that you can be your very best every single day. There's just a freedom there, and there's ability to bounce back and have some resolve that I think just allows me to go out and try to be the best I can be for our team and for our school.
If you haven't heard by now, we have partnered with BetMGM for the season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we'll have special offers for the listeners and the viewers. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using the bonus code FIELD. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you'll receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets. Go download the BetMGM app and use the code FIELD today. It's I was thinking about this today too as I was preparing for this interview. You're 43 years old, man. There are guys that we are doing
Crazy.
these interviews with for off the carousel that are older than you that are getting their first opportunity to be
Crazy.
able to be a head coach. And this, I believe, is year 13 for you as a
Yes.
head coach. You got your first job at Mount St. Mary's when you were 29,
Yes,
30,
sir.
somewhere
Yes, sir.
somewhere in that area. So it's you are still very young in terms of like your professional life, right? Like
Yep.
I mean, what, you got like 30 more years to work before you retire, something like
God
that,
willing. God
25,
willing.
30 years to work. So um I compare you a lot in my mind to someone like a Richard Pitino, right? Who who got an opportunity early. It didn't work out, reinvented himself at a lower level, and now was back. And look at what happened to him, right? Worked really well in New Mexico. Now he's back in the Big East at Xavier. And I just think that the opportunity is still there for you to be able to continue climbing. And it's nice to hear that you have that is the mindset that you have of this, right?
Yeah,
Because once you're kind of like, for a while, it's like you're on the rat race, right? And you're trying to build and you're trying to build and you're trying to build and trying to get there as fast as you possibly can. And then it comes crashing down, and you're like, well, I just want to do this and I just want to enjoy what I'm doing. And I think there's a freeing element of it when you kind of
absolutely.
get to that point where it's like, I just want to enjoy. I don't need to prove anything. I just want to enjoy what I'm doing at the highest level that I possibly can.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. Man, I'll tell you this. I mean, when you're on that hamster wheel,
Hmm.
it's not really a hamster wheel. I mean, you're moving in a direction. I'll be honest, I just felt like I lost myself. Like you're fighting so hard to keep up with whatever you think is next
Hmm.
that you lose a little bit of what makes you you, and I will never do that again. What allowed me to, I've been chosen by four different ADs and presidents to be the Division I head coach. I've been chosen by an Italian club that didn't know anything about me until a few weeks before. There's definitely something that we do that, and I've won at all four of the five places. I've been a part of winning at four of the five places. So the confidence should be in the process of that, and not being afraid to take a risk, not being afraid to rebuild yourself and to consistently do that. And so, I'm just appreciative that I get a chance to do it again, that I get to do it with the people that I love. I mean, you can see it even in the staff that I hired. I mean, I went out and got some guys, guys who had their back against the wall that are on their second or third chance. And I don't know if I would have ever done that before. And I just said, no, I'm going to go get some guys who are fighting for this thing in the same way that I'm fighting for it. But I appreciate you asking those questions. I mean, those are tough questions. But man, it's just a blessing really to have a chance to do it again. And like you said, that freedom. Like I feel like you guys at Field of 68 have the same freedom.
Look,
I mean, I
I'll be
seen all you
honest,
guys
man.
when you were
That's
corporate, when you had the ties on. I seen all you guys.
mhm.
Now,
Well,
you
I mean,
guys do it
that's
how you
that's
want to
part
do
of
it.
why we do it the way that we do it, right? It's because you could be more buttoned up. You could try to do this thing where it's like, look, we want to be on network television. We want to find a way to be simulcast on this, that, and the third. We want to find a way to be able to make this be more professional. But I feel like what people relate to is the vibe where it's just kind of like it's a bunch of guys hanging out talking ball. Like this
Yeah.
when we go out to dinner after like a day at Peach Jam, right? Like we want the vibe to be okay. You're hanging out with a bunch of guys that know basketball, talking basketball, because that's what we inevitably end up doing anytime we go anywhere, right? So how can we recreate that and allow an audience to be able to feel like they are sitting there with us and listening in on that conversation? And that's it. Just I think that's part of why it's worked is because we're just like, you know what, we can try to be that, or we can just be ourselves. And if we're just ourselves, then we're going to find success. You mentioned there though that you were hired by four Division I athletic directors, and like it makes sense if you're the AD at Siena and you see this guy taking Mount St. Mary's to a couple NCAA tournaments, you probably want to go interview him, right? And if you're the GW head coach and you see a guy having success at Siena, it's like, yeah, you know what, that makes sense. Let me go try to interview him. How the hell do you end up like in Palacanestro Trieste? How does that club find a
Yeah.
way to end up with a guy that was the coach at George Washington University? Like
Yeah.
that connection is the one I like. How the hell did you end up over there, man? Take me through that story.
Podcasting, I mean, the year I was out, and I thought, unlike a lot of coaches, they get fired. I said I was on put on forced sabbatical. Okay, that's how I like to phrase it. Forced sabbatical. Since we're in academic institutions, we can label it as sabbatical. But a lot of guys jump right back in, and I think that's a really dangerous thing. Like my life is all about just trying to learn as much as possible, and I like really enjoy this process of learning. And I felt like, man, we had a step back here. I need to learn. I need to learn why we took this step back, why they didn't push through, not to find excuses, but to find literal reasons so that, again, I can go and try to be the very best that I can become. And one of the things, we've talked about it a ton. Like I do have a media background. I'm a journalism major. I love writing, and you probably tell in the way that I like to communicate. So I started a podcast, and I just said, who are the people that I would want to talk to? if I'm a person who likes learning and likes business or, whatever, who would I want to get on? And one
Mhm.
of the guys that we came across was a guy named Michael Archieri. And Michael at the time was the GM for Varese, which also plays in the top division in Italy. And Michael and I hit it off in an incredible way on the podcast. I'm sure you've done this a few times where you just
Mhm.
meet a person for the first time and it's just the energy's right. And I remember walking downstairs and telling my wife, I said, why can't I work for someone like this? All this time, I've worked, I haven't been able to work for someone like this. Well, 5 months later, he's leaving Varese and he goes become the GM of Pallacanestro Trieste. And he calls me and says, hey, like, would you send me your resume? I thought it was for some NBA thing because he's had a bunch of NBA ties. And then a week later after that, he calls and says, hey, would you be interested in coming over here and coaching this team? You're the first person that I thought of for this opportunity. And so we just did, I think we almost had 70 episodes on the podcast. He was one of the 70 and we just hit it off. And I think it just shows that the willingness to, again, I like journalism. I'm not as good at it as you guys are. But the willingness to take a chance on something and take a risk really paid off for me. And I think they were pretty happy with what we were able to do there.
Yeah, man,
Me
that's
and JJ
wild.
Redick, JJ
One
Redick,
conversation led to a job that lets you get back, and it's wild how stuff like that plays
I
out,
always
man.
say JJ Redick and I are the two. He got LeBron on his podcast and he got the Lakers and I got to go to Italy. But maybe we had switched, it might have been different, but
Yeah, hey, look, you know what? I think you probably, I think you could definitely coach LeBron. I don't know if you would have been able to pull off the trade for Luka Doncic without putting a couple more assets into that deal. But hey, you never know, man.
well,
You just never.
Luca's dad spends a lot of time in Trieste.
Yeah, I was gonna
And
say,
so
how far are
you
you from first of all, can you name the town? Like, do you know how to pronounce it? Is it Ljubljana?
Ljubljana,
Ljubljana? Yeah, there's a lot of weird
Ljubljana.
consonants in there. So
Yeah.
Ljubljana.
Yeah, his dad spends a lot of time in Trieste actually. So I mean, there's a Trieste is interesting because it sits right beside Slovenia and Croatia,
Hmm.
furthest point in Italy before going into that part of Europe on the Adriatic Sea. So Trieste has a thing where it's Italian, but it has a lot of that the mix from the Slovenias and Yugoslavian. I would say like a Yugoslavian feel from
Like a
there. The
Balkan influence,
restaurant,
right?
yeah, the Balkans. So it's a little more Balkan than Italian. So I got a good feel for kind of both cultures, which is very nice.
Yeah. What's the thing that you're gonna miss the most?
Ooh.
Is it the pasta?
Um,
Is it the people? Is it the wine?
oh man,
Hey, look, it might just be the views on the Adriatic Sea, man. It's
no,
pretty nice
the
over there.
the fan base, their passion is incredible. I mean, Italy's a soccer country,
Hmm.
but Trieste is a basketball city. And that's what makes it great. Like when you're coming out there, I mean, there's 7,200 screaming people, flags, flares going off. They're chanting different songs. I mean, so, and when you lose, they chant songs to fire you. I've had that too. So, it's just this beautiful thing of their passion. I'm definitely going to miss the people and just their level of passion for it. It was like a rebuild. You think about they were in top division. They relegated the year before I got there. So there was anger, frustration. They were just so mad about our club relegating. And then we're able to gain the promotion and then able to sustain ourselves and be a top level team. We beat Milan this year. We beat Milan this year once and Veritas twice. So we went 3-1 against the EuroLeague, which they hadn't done before. So to be a part of that energy moving in a direction like a rebuild is exhilarating, and I got to be there at the perfect time to feel that sort of energy. So I'm gonna miss that. The pasta's great, the food's great, the wine's great. But the people and how much they cared about basketball, that's a real fun thing to be a part of.
Yeah, the good news is that the people at in Smithfield, Rhode Island, the Bryant University fans, like that crowd can get a little bit rowdy
Oh
too, man.
yeah,
We've
yeah.
seen them get after it, man. So if you tell them to light flares, I promise you those dudes are gonna show up with flares. I don't know if they're allowed to. That might be something to get you suspended by the American East, but they will show up with flares. So what is it? Why was Bryant the place that you ended up when you decided to come back?
When I was it's funny. I had a couple other opportunities a year ago, and a couple things kind of came through this year. I love their AD. I mean, Bill is all about winning. One of the reasons I was at Mount St. Mary's, and I'll say this, one of the reasons why I left Mount St. Mary's for Siena is because I just felt like we were not going to be able to keep up with Bryant. Because every time he came to campus, they were adding new stuff. There was just like this new energy that they brought into the Northeast Conference that I just didn't know if we could keep up with. Now, Donnie's done a great job there, and Dan did a great job after me. So that might have been a fear that isn't real. But I could just tell the energy of that place. Like they really wanted to win. There was like a hunger to win. When you talk about their crowd, I mean, I was on the other side of that crowd, and I could feel that energy, and I just felt like it was different. When I first told my wife that I spoke to Bryant, she goes, "You always loved that place." And I always felt like it had the DNA. And so I was not surprised that they've won two of the last four and that they've been able to attract. I mean, they win at every sport. Baseball is good, lacrosse is good, men's and women's volleyball is good. I mean, they win a lot. And I think there's something about being in a winning environment that I was just really attracted to. And I was just really excited about this opportunity. And the America East is a great basketball league. It's got great basketball tradition. And being a part of Bryant, still new into the America East gives me a little bit of that, underdog mentality. And, I was just really excited about that and working with Bill. I mean, I could tell I felt like he really wanted me to be his head coach. He waited 2 months for it. Okay.
Yeah,
So he really
and
wanted
you
me to
can
be
tell
there.
he was willing to let you go to the other side of the country, 9 hours time difference away, to go coach in front of a bunch of crazy Italians that bring flares, that get angry. Like you lose a game, you never know. You might be walking out into traffic and get hit with something out there,
You
Jamie. And
know,
so he was willing to wait for you to do that for two
yeah.
months. You could tell
And
he wanted you.
and I think that matters. I do think that matters and to me going through the hiring process. And he's one of the few ADs I talked to when I've interviewed that talked about winning.
Mhm.
You'll be amazed at how many ADs don't talk about winning. I mean, he talked about winning and why it was important. And I could tell that's why everybody wins. I mean, it starts at the top.
Yeah. What is maybe the biggest difference between the American game and the European game, and maybe something you didn't realize about it? That there's a lot of talk about, oh, why are all these European players coming into the United States? All basketball's our game, right? But you look
Yeah.
at Luca and you look at Joker and look at Giannis and you look at these guys coming in and kind of taking over. What did you learn maybe about the European game that you didn't necessarily know when you first got there?
I learned that a lot of these experts from over here don't know what they're talking about. Um, okay. You know, because we sort of look at Europeans as all one, where Giannis is from Greece.
Hmm.
Luka's from Slovenia. Like, you know, uh, Joker is from Serbia. They are not one place. You know what I mean? They're from all different places. And so I think number one is that every place in Europe plays a certain way that's different. You know, Greece, people from Greece, they play with a violent aggression. You see that from Giannis, just
Yeah,
getting down to
makes
violent
sense.
aggression.
That
People from
makes sense.
Slovenia play with a movement and a swagger and move side to side. I mean, they have a thing with them that's like you see that in Luka Doncic, how he plays, you know what I mean? And then Serbians are tough. I mean, they are tough and they're skilled and they kind of have this, Serbians that's such a war-torn country that they play with that aggression. Like no one picks on Jokic, you know what I mean? Because of his toughness. So the thing I learned is that every one of those countries has a different way that they play, that they're taught to play from the time they've grown up.
Mhm.
And that's why like our USA team struggles in competition. It's not because of talent. I think people go, "Oh, it's talent." No. It's because if you've been trained a certain way your entire life to play, they can plug and play guys into these different roster spots in these different countries, and they know exactly how they need to play. They've been taught this from the beginning. Where in the US, we really believe there's so many different ways to play. I mean, if you're a kid from California, you play this way. If you're a kid from New York, you play this way. And so when you bring the United States team together, you're really blending styles together more than anything. Those other countries are not working through that. I mean, there's a style that they all sort of play. France, for example, they play really up tempo and they take a lot of risk and a lot of chances on offense. And when you watch those leagues play, that's how they sort of play. So that's the biggest thing that I learned. Like when I had to adapt my coaching style to, all right, this coach is from Greece. He's going to do these things. He's going to play multiple defenses. They're going to really pressure the ball. This coach is from Serbia. They're not going to pick the ball up the floor, but they're going to be really aggressive in the half court and they're going to play through the post. Or, you could really learn by country how they were going to play. And in the Italian league, we have coaches from every single country just about. So it requires you a learning to figure out their style of play and what you can do to be better than that. Because they're going to know their style. A lot of times we would say like, these European guys read the game better. I don't necessarily think they read the game better or worse. I think they read at the same level, but they're taught their reads at such an earlier age that they can make them quicker. Like the USA can run flex the entire time. It doesn't matter what we do. But the fact that we do a lot of different things is why we struggle a little bit on the international side of it, because we're not adjusting to them, and they're staying forth with what they do.
My take is that the the talent gap is just closed, right? It went from being where Americans were just so significantly more talented than these European teams. So like you got a bunch of guys that probably could be decent pros on NBA rosters if they decided to come over to the United States that play on like the Serbian team and the Croatian team and the Italian team, the Spanish team, and that their level has come up to the point where when you kind of all put them into the system where everyone is bought in, it's kind of like watching a team from the Missouri Valley go take on a team that has a bunch of freshmen that are really highly touted out of the high major program, right? Where it's like, okay, it's going to make sense because they're going to guard, they play together, they're physical, they're all on the same page, and everybody accepts their roles. And the difference in how good they are is not enough to make up for the fact that that these guys have a style that they play that everyone is completely bought into. And that's kind of the way that I look at it. That it's not that it's changed on our end. It's that these European countries they've figured it out, man, and it's
Yeah.
not that big of a difference. And when you combine a bunch of like really good role players that buy into what they do around the best player in the world in Nikola Jokic and the best player in the world in Giannis and the best one of the best players in the world in Luka Doncic, like all of a sudden it's not that big of a difference.
Yeah. And I think you always like, what is talent?
Hmm.
I mean, like, and I think really evaluating what talent is. I mean, talent is the ability to do what you do best, but to empower others to do it even more.
Hmm.
And that kind of freedom that talent implies. And I think when I look at, when I look at, one thing with European guys is you learn. I mean, you're playing on a professional team. Luka's playing on a professional team at 15 years old, 16 years old, I think it was. He's learning how to be a role player that early. And European players have to learn how to be role players. Now, my Italian team, we had 7 Americans. We could play six at a time. And so if you're an Italian player, you had to learn how to play a role your career because you're going to be playing with 6 Americans majority of the time. And then if you're talented enough to break into the top one or two, what I mean, then they were bringing in American role players to fit around you. And so just the ability to have to learn that, I think, honestly, I think it's a major skill, to learn how to be a role player. Where I don't think we're teaching American players how to be role players. We're teaching them all how to be stars, and then when we get on the grand stage together, you're asking someone to now become a role
Exactly.
player.
Yeah,
And so that's
exactly.
why I say I don't know if the talent gap is different, but I think the understanding gap in, like, I mean, you and I are both role players, right?
Yep.
Uh, it's like knowing that I just have to do this at the highest level versus I want to do this, and that fighting constantly to figure out what I want to do versus what I have to do. I don't see that fighting when I see these European teams play. They know
And
what
that's
to do.
that's
They
why you
do.
see certain guys like latch on in the league and stick in the league, even if they're maybe not the like. There's a lot of guys that are playing in Europe that are like the top probably 100 like top. If you look at the best scorers in the world, the most
Mhm.
talented offensive players in the world, there's probably a bunch of guys that would be in that top 100 that are not in the NBA because
Yeah.
like you can only have so many Kevin Durant's,
Yeah.
right? You can only have so many Anthony Edwards. And if you're not like the absolute best on the entire planet, then why would we have you in here if you're not good enough to be that guy? Because when you got Ant Edwards, you know what you need around him? You need like a Jaden McDaniels, right? You
Absolutely.
need Nikhil Alexander Walker. You need Naz Reid. You need these guys that buy into doing a certain job around your superstars because there's only going to be so many superstars in
And
the
what's
NBA.
hard for people to understand is that some of those guys who are like 3-and-D guys would struggle to play in Europe
Hmm.
because they don't have an ant, right? You know what I mean? And so it's, oh, no. But then some of the guys who are like 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th guy on the NBA roster will be better in Europe because they can just go score. They just don't score better than Kevin Durant. Right. And so, like, and so it's hard for people to sort of understand. Like, you watch a guy like Mike James, who played in the NBA some, like, he's an incredible scorer. Like, could he be in the NBA? Absolutely, as 6th, 7th, 8th guy. But in Europe, he is the guy making 1.5 to 2 and the man on every team that he's going to be on. And so I think, people try to compare like the talents. It's like different jobs require different abilities. And not everyone can cross over and have success.
I'll tell you what, making $2 million a year playing in the places that Mike James has played in Europe,
Um,
like
in
there's a lot
Monaco.
worse things that you could be doing with your life, Jamie, and there's a lot worse things that you could be doing. All right, let me end it with you. Let me end this interview with this. We've seen St. Mary's become a powerhouse in
Mhm.
college basketball in the WCC by building an entire recruiting pipeline from Australia. Is that what we're doing here? Are we going to see Smithfield, Rhode Island be the new
Look,
home for all of the best Italian basketball players?
we've got incredible international connections now by being over there. I mean, I think that's something that I've really enjoyed getting to know. Like, a lot of people here need like a middleman. I don't need a middleman anymore.
Yeah, you
And
are the
I
middleman.
am the
You are the
middleman. I am the
middleman.
middleman. And I have a club behind me,
Hmm.
that has youth teams and all that. So we definitely have a strong connection there. I think all things are really done with good balance. And so, I do think, I do think a lot of people are making mistakes right now, bringing over so many internationals without having a chance to really watch them. I've had a chance to watch a lot of these guys that are signing above the America East. And, I would just think in the next 1 or 2 years, I think they're going to be bouncing back pretty hard. Um, but that's for them to figure out, and that's for them. That's their assessment. But I've been there. I've been watching. I've been at the youth games. I've been at the next gen. I've seen them. I mean, our every team in Italy has to have a youth team. So my team has a youth team that plays against all these guys. We play against all of them. I've seen them all play. And so we're gonna have a strong international field for sure. We're always going to recruit high school guys because I've had a lot of success with good high school players in their first season. And we're going to have a good balance of transfers, but we won't be all transfers. We won't be all internationals. And we won't be all high school. I think we're going to try to find the perfect mix. I think we're able to do that. I think that's important because I think if you have good high school players, then they can learn from the internationals and they can learn from the transfers. You need your high school guys to try to stay at least 2 years. If you're able to do that, that's going to give you a little bit more depth than what you need. So you don't have to keep always acquiring, players that come in. And so, we're going to kind of take this philosophy that we had in Policanestro Trieste and just kind of keep pushing in here. I don't know if we'll have, I don't think the roster will ever be half international. But I think there's
You
definitely going to
never
be
know, but you never
never
know.
know. Never know. That's what I say. You never know. But we have a strong international feel. I mean, I think the international guys we signed this year, we've signed a kid from Russia, a kid from France. We've got a kid that recruited at GW, that played at GW, that's Australian. And we'll have those guys with us and they're going to help us out. And I think next year with a couple of these other transfers that'll bounce back, we're going to end up with some really talented rosters from all around the world.
Jamion Christian, great to catch up with you, my friend. Congratulations on being back in college basketball.